So we're going to go a little bit into what is called the Gita Dhyanam, which is a prayer in praise of the Bhagavad Gita. And then we're going to go through chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita and go partway into chapter 2 today. That's my plan. Before we do those things, we'll do a prayer, and then I'll answer some of the questions that came in from last week's class. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saha Viryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So, questions from last week that were emailed into me are really about the story that I was telling, so it's better to go through those now. Let's see, what's the best order to take these? Okay, so 2 of the questions are about the sun and moon lineages that I began with last week. And so the first one is the story of the sun people in the Mahabharata as well, or in another text? So these stories about the planets are part of what's called the Puranas, or the Puranic stories in this tradition. And so you can find those stories in a number of places. Purana is Purana, if you're spelling it in English letters, Purana. And those are all of these sometimes very fantasy, unusual stories with characters that are planets and stars and animals and sages and gods and goddesses. All of those stories are part of the Puranas. So the story about the sun and the moon and all the planets and their various affairs and doings are Puranic stories, and they're found in various places. One text you could look into is the Devi Bhagavatam. Devi, D-E-V-I, Bhagavatam, B-H-A-G-A-V-A-T-A-M, Bhagavatam. Devi Bhagavatam is full of Puranic stories, and there's many other texts of Puranas, but that's one to begin with. Most translations of the Mahabharata that you get are not actually going to start with that moon story that I told, but the characters that are in the Mahabharata are part of that moon lineage. So I just thought it was a fun and interesting place to start, because we get some insight as to the constitution of that lineage being highly emotional and highly passionate and subject to changing their minds and things like that. The sun people, the text that highlights the sun people I mentioned, I think last week, is the Ramayana, the other well-known epic story of the Hindu tradition, Ramayana, the story of Rama and Sita, and it includes the story of Hanuman. That is those characters are part of the lineage of the sun. And again, the story is about the planets, or the characters and beings as planets, and the gods and goddesses are part of the Puranas, not really in these epics. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. The next one that was about the moon lineage. Okay, I see. It's not so much about the moon, but I'm not sure whether you all will be able to remember the story, but this will at least answer the question for this person. So how can the Pandavas be part of the moon lineage, or part of this same lineage of kings, if they're this? I'm going to read the question and I'll catch you up on the characters that are being referenced. If they are the sons of Satyavati's firstborn from a Swami who isn't even part of that lineage, or is he? So let's see if I can jump way. I did put this in here somewhere. You can see way ahead where we're headed today. Let's see. Okay, so for those who are interested in the story, here's what happens to remind us, so that Satyavati was married to King Shantanu. Satyavati was the daughter of the fisherman who was extremely ambitious and insisted that his daughter could only marry the king if her sons would also become kings, or if her children would be royals and be able to have the opportunity to be seated on the throne. That's why Bhishma took his vow of celibacy and vow to protect the throne but never sit on the throne, and vow not to have children, so that it would be guaranteed that Satyavati's children would have an opportunity at the throne. When her son with King Shantanu dies before having children, his widows then have children by her son from a previous encounter, and that is Sage Vyasa. So the rules at this time are maybe different than what we would think of at this time in terms of who belongs to whom in a lineage. Because Satyavati was married to a king, then any of her children become part of that lineage. And because, let's see, Vichitra Virya, the one who died, his wives, their children become part of that lineage, even if those children are not Vichitra Viryas. Okay, so any child, to put it simply, any child that the widows have will be heirs, potential heirs to the throne. It's actually maybe a little bit less of a sexist setup than what we would think of today. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question. It doesn't matter as long as they were married. Ambika and Ambalika were once married to Vichitra Virya before he passed. Their children have a right to the throne, and that's why Pandu's children then have a right to the throne. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a very complicated story with too many characters to keep track of. Okay. The next simpler question to answer is, how can Arjuna have any relationship? Okay, this person said, this is jumping ahead into the story. How can Arjuna have relationship with the people he's about to fight with if he grew up in the forest? So I did realize I omitted a part of this story, many parts, but one that's key. We'll see when we get to the battlefield in chapter 1 that, and most of you know this, Arjuna drops to his knees in dismay when he realizes that his loved ones are on the other side of the battlefield that he's about to fight. And so the question is, like, how can his cousins, for example, why would he even have remorse or even any relationship with them if he grew up in the forest and they grew up in the kingdom? When the Pandavas, when the father Pandu dies and the Pandavas come back to the kingdom, they're still fairly young. They had been growing up in the forest to a certain point, immersed in nature, close to nature, as I described last week. But then when they return to the kingdom, they're still young enough that they do come up with their cousins. They're learning together with the same teachers. They're learning the same teachings together. They're living amongst one another. And so they are in relationship. And I'll talk a little bit more about Arjuna's perspective and feelings towards his cousins in a little bit, and how it's different than his cousins feel towards him and why that is. And then finally, has Vishnu ever come to earth on another occasion to protect Dharma other than in the Gita? So yes, there are a number of avatars, descended stars that are considered to be, we could say, incarnations of Vishnu, or Vishnu coming to earth for the purpose of protecting Dharma. And so Krishna is just one of them, one example. And in some cases, people will think of the Buddha as an incarnation of Vishnu. Lord Rama from the Ramayana is an incarnation of Vishnu. Narasimha, some of you will know, that's the man that's part lion, is an incarnation of Vishnu, and so on. You might even find people that say that Jesus is an incarnation of Vishnu. So from the Hindu perspective, sometimes what you see is that it's much more inclusive. It's sort of the idea is like, we'll take all the help we can get. Sure, that's one of our guys. That's one of our guys. So you'll see, in those of you who've been to India may have seen there'll be posters with Rama and Krishna and Shiva and Jesus and Buddha and all of the different saints and sages and what would be considered maybe avatars of all times all together. But yes, there have been other what are considered specific avatars of Vishnu. And it is always a form of Vishnu that comes because Vishnu is the sustaining factor of manifestation. So when things are threatening to go off kilter on earth, it is the quality of, or the capacity of upholding Dharma that needs to be upheld. And that's what the Vishnu principle is in this story, coming in the form of Krishna, the principle of upholding Dharma. That's a good place to begin. Okay, so just to orient ourselves to the text today, I did this a little bit last week, but this is just zeroing in a little bit to also address some other questions that came up last week. So the Upanishads are considered the source texts of Advaita Vedanta, which is the teaching of all as one. And the various Upanishads, which come at the end of the Vedas, are attributed to various rishis or sages. And then from the Upanishads, we have the Bhagavad Gita encased within the Mahabharata, which are the teachings of the Upanishads refined and concentrated in one place in the Gita and delivered in a way that is particularly meaningful for all people, including people that are living lives as householders. And sometimes the Bhagavad Gita is called the fifth Veda. And it is attributed to Veda Vyasa. And we'll just leave it at that for now. And then I'm just putting this word here, bhashya, in case I refer to it later. Bhashya is the Sanskrit word. The English equivalent is commentary. And so the traditional bhashya that we refer to, so the explanation of the meaning behind the verses of the Gita, that explanation, the most traditionally used explanation, commentary, or bhashya is from Adi Shankaracharya, and he would be considered the patriarch of Advaita Vedanta. He expounded on many of the Upanishads, including the Bhagavad Gita. So when we try to understand what the meaning is behind the words, the first place we look is, what did Adi Shankaracharya have to say about that? And Bhagavad Gita means the song of God, literally, that's the meaning. Bhagavad is really the word Bhagavan, that just makes a change to Bhagavad when you combine it with Gita. So the song Gita of Bhagavan is what this is. And it's considered a song or a Gita because it's written in poetic form that can be sung. It takes about 2.5 hours to sing all of the verses in their entirety. It's also considered a Gita because the subject matter is pleasing in the way that a song is pleasing. The word Gita is a feminine word, and that is because all of the texts that are heard or called Shruti, those get a feminine name. Any text that is a revealed text that comes through the power of sound and song is given a feminine name. And why Bhagavan? Why the song of God? Because the teacher in this text is Krishna, who satisfies all of the qualifications of someone who is entirely knowing of the self, or of the self as consciousness itself, not only knowing of the truth of his own being, but also able to convey that truth to a student. So those and other qualifications are what make Krishna described as Bhagavan, or God, or Lord. So song of God. And what is the point of the Bhagavad Gita? There are two main subject matters considered in the Gita. The first, this is like the purpose, okay? Why do we even study the Gita and what is it all about? The first point or subject matter of the Bhagavad Gita is called Brahma Vidya. It is, the purpose is knowing. To know, what am I? What is the truth of my being? What is the world? And what is God? To understand life as it is, okay? That's called Brahma Vidya, to understand the truth behind all of this, all right? And the other purpose is, so if that's knowing, to know something, the other purpose is doing. Making this text a yogic text or a yoga text or yoga shastra in Sanskrit. That is to say, we get information in this text about how to live life. Not only how to understand life, that's the first purpose, Brahma Vidya, but the second purpose is, how do I live life? How do I act, respond, make choices, live my life in an apt, useful way? And the word yoga in this context means a means, the means to something. So yoga means a practice or a means in this context. So what is the means to living a life that's also in accordance with my bigger purpose of knowing what is the purpose of everything, or what is everything? Okay. All righty. So traditionally, before we dive into the study of the Gita, we do this prayer called the Gita Dhyanam. It's in praise of the Gita, in praise of the Bhagavad Gita. And the reason that we do this prayer is that it honors the text, and it also invokes it invokes a request for success. We've made an effort to be here in various ways to come together. That's some effort that we made on our part, okay? That we have some control over, the efforts that we make to show up and learn something. And then there's the rest of the world. Is our environment supportive of our effort to be here to study this? The people in our lives, are they supportive? For example, did my husband just leave with the children, the very loud children, for a few hours so that I can teach, so that I'm not distracted or disturbed? So my environment, the people around me, may they support me. And then may those unseeable factors of life, may all of that also be in support of my endeavor to study this, okay? So that third piece, so there's me, my efforts, there's the efforts and support or non-support of my environment and the people around me, and then there's the influence of unseeable factors. We make a prayer before we dive into the study of something in an attempt to also ask that those unseeable factors also be in support of my endeavor to study something. All right. So may I be protected, may the class be protected, and also may the text itself be protected. May the text and teachings be protected. So this is a call. A prayer is always a call to unseeable factors for success in something. And that's what the Gita Dhyanam is in one perspective. The other thing about the Gita Dhyanam is it actually gives us some information about what the text has to offer us. Okay, so in praise of the Bhagavad Gita or Gita Dhyanam. This is the first verse. It goes on after this, but we're just going to do the first verse. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritam Varshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusha Dadami Bhagavad Gita Bhavad Dveshinim. and the meaning. Om, goddess. Remember the feminine form, goddess, mother, Bhagavad Gita. I repeatedly invoke you who were taught by Bhagavan Narayana himself for the sake of Arjuna, the son of Kunti, you who were faithfully collected and reported by the ancient sage Vyasa and placed in the middle of the Mahabharata. You who are in 18 chapters, you, Gita, who have the nature of showering the nectar of non-duality or oneness, and who is the destroyer of the life of becoming or the life of suffering. So we're going to look at this a little bit further. Let's see. Okay, so I broke down here some of the, I'm breaking this down a little bit more explicitly here. So the meaning of this first verse, or first line of the first verse, Om Goddess Mother Bhagavad Gita. So here we are kind of, we could say, anthropomorphizing the text as Mother Goddess. And this is to make the teachings living, alive for us. All right. And when a teaching is alive, it's also subject to the interpretation of the teacher. The teacher has choice with which how to convey and how to be in, we all are able to be in relationship with the text when we imagine it as a living, breathing being, Mother Goddess. So we're entering into relationship with the text in the way that we enter into relationship with a beloved person. And in this case, the most beloved person, the mother. Although, of course, it doesn't always work out that way. I know that your mother may not be your most beloved person, but in theory, archetypally speaking, okay. All right, so why Goddess Mother? Because mother is considered, so again, this is the archetype of mother. This is when mother goes well, when the mother role is going well. The mother is the compassionate one, the one who gives, the one who specifically gives of her own milk to nourish the child. The one who doesn't always give the child what he wants, but always gives the child what he needs. That's mother. You don't always hear what you want from your mother. You hear what you need to hear. You don't always get what you want, but you get what you need. The mother, meaning the one who's most dear to us, who loves us unconditionally and who wants what is best for us. Okay, so why I repeat, the next line is I repeatedly invoke you. Why? Because we can study this again and again and again. I repeatedly invoke you. Like a delicious nectar, you just want more. And every time you have another taste, something more profound unfolds for you. So I repeatedly invoke you. And you who were taught by Lord Narayana himself, meaning by God or by Vishnu, by Krishna, the sustaining factor of manifestation. You who were taught for the sake of Arjuna, okay, the son of Kunti. Why reference that he's the son of Kunti? There could be rhythmic reasons why that works well in the verse, but also we're invoking the mother again when we reference Kunti. That's Arjuna's mother. And also we're bringing up Arjuna here because it's not just enough to bring up the teacher. We also need to honor the student, because without a student, there's no teaching. Krishna, we'll see, keeps his mouth shut until Arjuna asks for a teaching. So it's only because Arjuna has a crisis and then asks for a teaching that we get to sit in on the teaching as well. So we're honoring the student and the teacher, and thus we're honoring the student-teacher relationship, without which there would be no teaching. Okay, and let's see, for the sake of Arjuna, meaning that the reason the teaching comes is because he is suffering. And we, as students of the Bhagavad Gita, hopefully will begin to identify with Arjuna as we get to listen in on his own crisis. As we identify with Arjuna, the listener of the teachings, then we see that these teachings are also for our own sake, for our own plight. All right. And you faithfully collected and reported by sage Vyasa and placed in the middle of the Mahabharata. So we're honoring the person who made it possible for these teachings to survive all of these several thousand years. Veda Vyasa, the one who compiled the teachings into beautiful poetry. And we are invoking the Mahabharata here to say that the context matters, placed in the middle of the Mahabharata, and that honoring the Mahabharata, which has also been a means of protecting the Gita. If it was just a text, it may not have survived just the Gita alone, but in this incredibly fantastic story of the Mahabharata that people love to listen to and watch be performed, because of that, the Gita has survived all these years. And in 18 chapters, I won't get into, but 18 is an extremely significant number in the Vedic tradition, and it may be the fact that it was in 18 chapters, that it is in 18 chapters, also that the text has been able to survive over time and be so incredibly meaningful to so many people. All right. I will say about the number 18 that the number 18 has a relationship to particular star patterns that are described in Vedic astrology. And so it's also to say that the fact that there are 18 chapters in the Gita means that there's also some, we can say, sort of protection from above, protection from the star patterns in terms of the Gita's ability to be with us today and onward. And then you, the Bhagavad Gita, who have the nature of showering the nectar of non-duality. This text offers the teaching of oneness, which is often referred to as Advaita Vedanta. And it does so in such a complete way that it is like you're being showered with that teaching, in the way that a shower removes all of the dust and the dirt and the smells and so on. The Gita, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, have a capacity to remove all of our mental distortions, our psychological pain, our anguish, our inner conflict, and our confusion. And the nectar of non-duality, because we'll go into this as we dive into these first two chapters today, we are confused, feeling unfulfilled and inadequate and starved for a sense of fulfillment. And the Gita is a nectar that fulfills us completely. It gives us what we've been searching for all this time, and we've been running after the wrong things in order to gain that satisfaction. You could almost think of the Gita as being like the superfood of the text. You know, people in the health world are always saying, what's the one magical superfood that'll give me everything that I want? Is it avocado? Is it honey? Is it ghee? And even in Ayurveda, we have certain superfoods that are said to be whole and completely deeply nourishing. And so those are described as a nectar. And in that way, the Bhagavad Gita is a nectar. It is whole and complete, and it nourishes us wholly and completely, deeply satisfying us. And is the destroyer of the life of becoming samsara. I'm going to leave that because we're going to get into what that is as we go into the text. This is a classical image of Adi Shankaracharya, okay, who I mentioned wrote the primary bhashya or commentary on the Bhagavad Gita that we use. Later in the Gita Dhyanam, in further verses, this is also said, Krishna is a wish-fulfilling tree who milks the nectar that is the Gita. The Upanishads are the cows. The one who milks the cows is Krishna. So Krishna has this capacity to milk the nectar from all of the Upanishads, so kind of refining the perfect superfood from all of the Upanishads. And the calf who partakes of the nectar is Arjuna. The Gita itself is the milk. Okay. So what we're going to dive into today is the first 2 chapters of the Gita. And each chapter has a name. So the first chapter is Arjuna Vishada Yoga, and that means the topic of Arjuna's sorrow. And then the next chapter, chapter 2, is Sankhya Yoga, the topic of knowledge. It's important, I think, to say here, and it'll come up later. Some of you may have heard this karma yoga, bhakti yoga, so on, the different yogas. And I'm going to get into why that's a little bit of a misnomer and a confusion, a popular confusion in the yoga world, that there are different yogas. But part of the reason for the confusion is because the names of the chapters have the word yoga. So it makes it sound, when we get to karma yoga, the chapter on action, it sounds like that's a form of yoga. But in this context, the word yoga simply means topic. Otherwise, the topic of Arjuna's sorrow would be the practice of Arjuna's sorrow. And that's not what it is. It's simply topic. Okay, so these are the 2 topics. We'll get partway through chapter 2 today. So here we go. Ready for takeoff. The first shloka is verse. All right, the first verse of the first chapter. The very first word is the name Dhritarashtra. That's the name of the blind king. And so we open on the Bhagavad Gita. It is the very first morning of the first day of battle. It will be 18 days of gruesome, bloody battle has yet to start. This is the first morning of the first day of battle. And the opening scene is Dhritarashtra, the blind king, or the inhabitor of the throne, he's technically not the king, is sitting on the throne, and with him is a character named Sanjaya. And Sanjaya has a capacity called Divya Drishti. He has audio-visual powers, magical audio-visual powers. So he can hear and see at a distance beyond the frontiers of normal human capacity for perception. And of course, the blind king can't be in the war. So what he's doing is we start the text with him asking for a play-by-play of the battlefield from Sanjaya, who can view it from a distance. And this is actually how we come to have the Bhagavad Gita, is because of Dhritarashtra's desire to know what's happening and Sanjaya's capacity to see and hear what's happening. Thus, Sanjaya is the narrator of the entire scene. All right. And so here we have the first shloka. Upakrama is a word that means that which comes at the beginning of a text. So the very first word, as I said, is Dhritarashtra. It's the name of the king. And interestingly, the very beginning of Dhritarashtra's name is Dhra, which is the root of the word dharma. And so what that means is that the very first word of the text is the root word of the word dharma. That means we're beginning the text with the word dharma. And it's said that when we look at a Vedic text or a Vedanta text, what comes at the very beginning is extremely important. So we can take this to understand that dharma is a main topic of the Bhagavad Gita. Because we begin with the name Dhritarashtra. Dhra is the root for dharma, means that which sustains, and rashtra actually means the whole world. So that which sustains the world is the meaning of the name Dhritarashtra when we break down the name. Of course, we know that Dhritarashtra himself as a personality is actually partly responsible for a great deal of adharma and for destruction. Here, what matters more is the roots that make his name, okay? And so what Dhritarashtra says is, Sanjaya, what is happening on the field of dharma? The Dharma Kshetra, some of you have heard this word before. Dharma Kshetra is the name of the battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita. Kshetra is field, dharma means Dharma. So the field of Dharma. What is happening on the field of Dharma is the first thing he asks. And then he asks about mamaka, my people. What are my people doing? And what are those other people doing? The Pandavas, what are they doing? Okay. Let's see. Let's look first at this word, at this concept of Dharma Kshetra, the field of Dharma. So to remember Dharma again and again in this text, of course, as I said, Dharma's utmost importance because it begins the text not only in Dhritarashtra's name, but then the first thing he says when he speaks is Dharma Kshetra. It's the first thing he says. Dharma, there's the word again at the beginning. Okay, twice it is said Dharma in that first verse. So the field is the field of Dharma because this is the battlefield in which we are having an opportunity for either Dharma to take over or adharma to take over. So on this is the fight for good versus evil. We're going to talk a little bit more about the war as we move further into chapter 1. Okay, so partly it's the field of Dharma because it is the field upon which either Dharma or adharma, that which violates Dharma, righteousness, rightness, and the law of nature and so on, which one will win, good or evil, Dharma or adharma. Okay, and in general, what we're learning through the whole story of the Mahabharata, of which we got through half, all right, the first half before the war, and then the Gita itself, what we will come to see is that the laws of Dharma are intricate. There's no rule book that says this is right, this is wrong, and you just follow the rule book. It is much more complex than that. And each situation, for those of us who wish to live dharmic lives, each situation has to be looked at with intricacy. We can't just look at a final outcome, for example, and think that we have all the answers or think that we know how to address a situation just because of the outcome. For example, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, if someone comes to me with skin acne, skin blemishes, I can't just have a fix, give me something for this. It doesn't work that simply. I have to backtrack and look at everything that's leading up to the situation. What is the underlying cause? What is the momentum of karma, of action that's led to this, in order to know the dharma of the situation, in order to know what is right? Is it related to the gut? Is it lifestyle? Is it hormonal? Is it nervous system related? There's so much to unpack, so that to be dharmic, we'll see, requires that we be very awareful, very deliberate, and very aware moment to moment of what the circumstance right now is calling on us to do. A number of you are yoga therapists in this course, and also Ayurvedic practitioners, but also people who take care of other people in other kinds of ways. And you know that you could have two people come to you with the same problem and you'll deal with it very differently. Same with parenting. Two children with the same problem, you might handle it very differently because of their individual constitution and circumstance. And so dharma in this way is something that's very alive. So in that way, life itself is the field of dharma. And the battlefield is a metaphor for that, for life itself being a field in which the intricacies of the laws of dharma are being played out. And we are, with our divine will, also part of that play of the laws of dharma. So we'll see Arjuna's predicament as we move forward with the predicament that comes up for him. He is having a dharma problem. He's running into a question of what is the right thing to do in this moment, and he's highly confused. And this will be something that we can all relate to. We all have many experiences in life, small to big, in which we're not really sure what the right thing is to do. even though we really want to do the right thing, let alone the many times when our fears and desires take over and we just don't even care about what the right thing is. We just care about getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want. Even when we want to do the right thing, it's easy to get very confused. And so part of the goal of someone who might call themselves a yogi is to fine tune our capacity for discernment so that we can easily, over time, start to easily discern what is the right thing. And when we do that, what happens is your own individual opinion and preference becomes fairly irrelevant. Okay, because what is right is not always what is convenient or what is preferable to me. Actually, one of the people in this program is in Iceland currently traveling, and I got an email from them today saying, I really want to be on the call, but it's 10 p.m. and I'm realizing, because it's light, for like almost whatever it is, 23 hours a day there right now, that if I don't go to sleep, in line with my natural circadian cycles, if I stay up late and join the class live, then I won't be able to sleep all night. So this is a good example of dharma, because one of the laws of dharma is the body's need to get a certain amount of sleep at a particular time of day. And if we try to override that, even for a good reason, even for a Bhagavad Gita class, it's a violation of the dharma of the body. And so being discerning, this person had to make a choice using their own divine free will, choosing what is dharmic, that has nothing to do with what my personal preference is. Okay? So I thought that was a very good example of a dharmic choice that I got that email today from one of the students. So now, Duryodhana, he asks what's happening on the field, on the battlefield, the Dharma Kshetra, and he also asks what is happening with my people, Mamaka, and those other people, Pandava. Okay, so what's happening is Dhritarashtra and then his son Duryodhana, okay, that's the cousin of Arjuna, they see two sides. They see my people and those other people. And so Sanjaya proceeds to, for the next number of 10 shlokas, essentially Sanjaya is explaining what's happening on the battlefield. And what's happening on the battlefield is Duryodhana is, that's the side that's in opposition to the Pandavas, to Arjuna and his brothers and Krishna. Duryodhana is galloping around on his chariot or whatever, and he's comparing the two sides. He's puffing himself up and patting himself on the back for all the great heroes who are sacrificing themselves for him and giving up their lives for me, he says. And he begins listing all of the wonderful celestial weapons that they have on their side and listing the names of the experts in warfare that have come along to his side. He's bragging about it all and revving himself up and revving up the warriors on his side for battle. He's talking about who's on whose side. And this is all about puffing himself up. We know psychologically what that's about, right? He actually feels fairly insecure. He knows Dharma's not on his side. He knows he's up against great warriors on the other side. And so he feels a need to puff himself up. And the fact that he's doing this and that it's all about the two sides gives us insight into his rajasic nature. Rajas, many people in this course will know that word. Rajas has to do with fire and divisiveness, okay? Breaking apart, passion, drive, greed. These are all part of Rajas, okay? And so he sees two sides. He particularly runs to Drona, one of the warriors on his side, to give a pep talk because he feels that Drona is what I think is called a fly risk, okay? Drona is actually the teacher of Arjuna and his brothers. He was the teacher of all of the cousins of that generation, taught them all the laws and skills of warfare is what Drona did. And his favorite student, his most beloved student, was Arjuna. but he's on Duryodhana's side. This is all the complexity of karma and dharma at play here. Why Duryodhana, his most beloved student, is Arjuna. Why is he on the opposing side with Duryodhana? This is just one example of many stories like this. He's on that side because he has what he feels is a revenge debt to pay against the father of Arjuna's wife from childhood. And so he's got this revenge feeling. He's on the wrong side of dharma just for the sake of revenge. And then there's Bhishma, grandfather Bhishma. He's on the wrong side of dharma, though he's a very highly dharmic person. He's the one that took the vow of celibacy several generations back. He's highly dharmic, but he committed to his vow and put his vow above true dharma. Okay, so you can see all the momentum of these choices and actions from the past and people's psychology that's leading to this particular moment, how people end up on the wrong side of dharma, which happens time and time again. We can look at our own lives, we can look at politics to see how there's a momentum that causes people to be on the wrong side of dharma at times, even good people. All right, so he sees our side and the other side, and Dhritarashtra, his father, who's being narrated all of this on his throne, he also sees Mamaka, my people, and the Pandavas, those other people. All right. Okay. So then what happens? Most people know from this point. What happens is now Arjuna asks Krishna, take me to the center of the battlefield. I want to get the lay of the land. I want to see what's happening. So Krishna, being the charioteer, drives Arjuna to the center of the Dharma Kshetra. And what happens? It says he saw his elders, his grandfathers, his teachers, his uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, friends, fathers-in-law, and well-wishers in two armies. On both sides, he sees those who are beloved to him. He sees these are all my people. So where his opponent, Duryodhana, sees two, those guys and my people, Arjuna sees one. Where Duryodhana is Rajasic, Arjuna is Sattvic. He sees only one people. All these people are my people. They are all dear to me. There are no sides here. And in that moment, he becomes completely overwhelmed, full of sadness, and he goes into a complete crisis and tailspin. In the midst of this crisis, he actually describes how he's feeling. He says, these people are my own people. I'm seized by compassion. And then Sanjaya describes, sorrowfully speaking, Arjuna says, my limbs are losing their strength, arms and legs losing their strength. My mouth is drying up. See if you've ever had this experience. If you've ever had a moment of anxiety or freak out, okay? Limbs are losing their strength. My mouth is drying up. My body is trembling. The bow is slipping from my hand. My skin is burning. I cannot stand up, and my mind is totally confused. Can we relate to that? See how in this state, he is able to observe himself. The last time you had this experience, were you able to acutely observe what was happening for you in this way? Yes, and sometimes no. So then what does he do? he begins, as many of us do when we have a crisis, to rationalize the situation. Okay? So he does not like this circumstance that he finds himself. He has a circumstantial problem. Oh, just lost a slide here. Hold on. Okay. And so then he starts to rationalize. He's trying to get out of the situation now. Okay. But in a very wise way. So he says, he gives 4 main reasons why he shouldn't fight. He falls down, he drops the bow, he's weak in the limbs, and still he's able to give some very sound arguments. All right. He says, first of all, I cannot destroy my loved ones who are on both sides of the battlefield here. I can't bear the thought of killing them. All right. Second, I can't bear the overall destruction because, of course, there are people on both sides of the battlefield who he also does not have a relationship with. He doesn't have a relationship with all the many, many people. So some with whom I cannot destroy those I love. And also, I can't bear the thought of all the destruction that's going to inevitably take place as a result of this battle. We have the best warriors in the world on both sides. Okay. The third reason is, after this war, what will be remaining of society? We will have generations of damage. The men will be killed. The women will be widowed. The children will be orphaned. What's to come? What good can possibly come of all of this destruction? I wouldn't even want the kingdom that I would inherit after all of this destruction. Okay? So he's seeing at this point the larger implications beyond just, I don't want to kill people that I love. There are larger societal implications for this war taking place. And then finally, he says, essentially, I'll definitely go to hell if I do this. So there's a consequence, a direct consequence to me for committing this act, which seems to me to be completely against everything that I know to be dharmic. And he describes, he says, they say, meaning the tradition in which he's been raised, they say that a life of pain will come to those who destroy the family. And I don't want a life of pain. So highly wise reasons, highly dharmic reasons, because we see here how Arjuna is a highly principled person. They're not flimsy arguments. They're very rationalizations, all right? In addition to these reasons, he also says, I see bad omens. What would even be the point of killing one's own people? What good could possibly come of it? I don't want victory if this is how I have to get it. I don't have any desire to kill these people, even if they want to kill me. And no satisfaction can come from this. And then he says, it would be better for me if they just kill me now unarmed. He says that. We have that expression, don't we? At least American English people say, just kill me now, when they're like having a crisis, big and small. So this is what he says. It would be better for me if they just kill me now unarmed. And oh, I did do something. Oh dear. Hold on. Okay, having said this in the middle of the battlefield, so this is the first chapter, 47th verse. Having said this, all this, in the middle of the battlefield with his mind completely overcome by grief, Arjuna sat down in the back of the chariot, casts aside his bow and arrows. So he's in a place of total defeat. To see what happened here. Something weird happened with my slides. Hold on, everybody. Okay. Just missed a few. All right. So what happens is now that's the end of the first chapter. That's what's happening. Okay. And then we come into chapter 2. All right. So chapter 1 scene ends with Arjuna dropped to the ground. All right. Chapter 2 begins with Krishna now admonishing Arjuna. He's urging him to get up and fight. So, he says, this kind of despair, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, this kind of despair is unbecoming of an upright person like you. It won't bring you any fame, and it won't get you to heaven. Don't yield to this unmanliness. Sorry, it's not modern speech, okay? Don't yield to unmanliness. This does not befit you. Give up this lowly weakness of heart and get up. And then they go back and forth. So at this point, Arjuna and Krishna, they are cousins and they are dear friends. So they are dear friends having a debate, an argument about this circumstance. All right. Now, why would God tell Arjuna, tell a warrior to get up and kill a bunch of people? Why? We have to keep in mind why we went through all the context. We have to remember this is what's called in Sanskrit a dharma yuddha, a just war. A just war is a very rare occurrence. There are many unjust wars, of course, as we know. This is a truly dharma yuddha. How do we know this? We know this because of the context. We've seen how Arjuna tried everything to avoid the war. And at this point, Duryodhana's power is so great and his instinct towards destroying others in order to get what he wants is so great that if he's left unstopped, that will mean the destruction of dharma on all of manifestation. And when Arjuna and his brothers attempted to avoid war, at the final point, Duryodhana said, the only way you're going to stop me is to kill me for it. And that was the beginning of the war. You'll have to come after me to stop this. And we also know that it's a just war because it is, if we take trust that Krishna is an expression of the principle of the upholding of manifestation, the sustaining principle of manifestation, if that sustaining principle is saying, get up and fight, and we can cultivate some trust in ourselves as students, then we would say, okay, it must be a just war because otherwise Krishna would not be telling him to get up and fight. So Krishna is sort of giving him a pep talk. Just get up. This is your duty. It's not becoming of you, this weakness. Get up and fight. This is a dharma yuddha, a just war. This must be done. Get over yourself. Do what must be done. And Arjuna says, Krishna, you don't know what this is like. Krishna himself is a warrior who fought against many foes, but he says, you've never had to kill your own loved ones, your own people. You've only had to go to battle with demons. It was very clear in your situations what you had to do. You never had a confusing, complex situation like I'm facing right now. You don't know what I'm going through. Arjuna says, if I kill them, any pleasure I experience after that will be stained with their blood. All right. And then what happens is in the 7th and 8th verses of the 2nd chapter, what happens is Arjuna, after making his points and arguing with Krishna, he says, I'm overcome. I am confused about my duty. Please tell me what is truly better for me. I am your student. Please teach me. I take refuge in you. So he's becomes so overcome, and he's recognizing his own confusion. And what we learn about Arjuna here is what an apt student he is for the teachings, the nectar of the teachings, is that he is able to say, this is what I think, but I'm confused. What do you think? You please tell me. His capacity to be so open-minded is a capacity that we all want to cultivate in order for our minds to be available for the teachings here. And then what happens is, in the next verse, these two verses really go together. So first he's saying, I'm really confused. You tell me what's the right thing to do. I'm confused about my duty here. And in the next verse, he says, in fact, I realize, I'm going to rephrase this a little bit. He says, in fact, I realize that there's nothing that will remove the sorrow that I'm feeling right now. Even if I were to win this battle and to gain an unrivaled and prosperous kingdom on earth, or even if I were to gain sovereignty over all of heaven, still I would be full of sorrow. And he says, you help me with that. I need help with two problems, essentially, is what's happening. I need help with this circumstantial problem. I don't understand what my duty is here. What am I supposed to do? Please tell me what to do. I take refuge in you. You are my teacher. And please tell me what to do about this more fundamental problem that I now realize I have, which is that I will feel unfulfilled and thus full of sorrow either way, whether I fight and win or I run away and avoid this altogether, which seems to be more appealing to me right now. Either way, I will feel a deep sense of sorrow. Now, we are meant to relate to this. The problem is that we generally, most of us, unless we're suffering from something like clinical depression, most of us don't walk around describing ourselves as feeling sorrowful. So I have to use some other words to describe this fundamental problem, because this is the fundamental human condition. We all suffer from this sorrow, though we don't necessarily call it that. So before I do that, I'll just say again, what he's having here is a recognition of a more fundamental problem that's even more deep than the situation at hand, than the circumstance, all right? In the Upanishads, what's being addressed is the fundamental problem of the human condition, okay? In the Bhagavad Gita, what's being addressed is the fundamental problem of the human condition and the circumstantial problem of what to do day to day in our lives. Okay, that is what makes this text unique and special, and for a text for people that have circumstantial problems to deal with every day. All right. And because he's realizing this fundamental problem, he's also making a request for what is called shreyas, which means happiness that doesn't come or go. So I'm going to talk about that in a little while. But first, let's talk about the fundamental problem of the human condition, which is also called samsara. Some of you have heard this term before. Samsara can be called a life of suffering. Swami Dayananda calls it a life of becoming, constantly becoming something and then losing what I become, and then become something else and losing that and become something else. And that's a life of suffering. So here's our problem. Here's some other words. If sorrow doesn't do it for you, see if you can relate to any of these. A sense of dissatisfaction. Now, I'm not saying you feel this way all the time, though I sort of am, but at times do you feel a sense of dissatisfaction? A sense of feeling incomplete, like something's missing, feeling unfulfilled, insecure, anxious, or angsty, worried? Or on the other side of it, if you can't recognize that you feel unfulfilled at times, do you crave things that you think will satisfy you? Why? Because of feeling unfulfilled, right? Do you run after things or try to avoid things in order to avoid a feeling of dissatisfaction or incompleteness or insecurity? All right. These are different names to try to get at this human conditioning, this human condition of suffering. And samsara is a word that explains the cycle that we go through because of this suffering. Because what we do is we feel inadequate, incomplete, dissatisfied, and so on, something like that. And then we go after something to help feel satisfied. But everything that we can get in the world will only give us short-term satisfaction. Like this little child with the lollipop, okay? While she has the lollipop, happy. If she drops the lollipop, devastation, okay? Or when the lollipop is gone, now I want a puppy. I want a stuffed animal. I want mommy. I want to be entertained, okay? This is samsara. I feel something's missing. And so I go after many, many things, trying to feel complete. And sometimes it works, but it never lasts like a lollipop. Can't ever last. It's impossible. And that's samsara. It doesn't last. And so then I soon want more of the same thing, or I generate a desire for something else, thinking this next thing will satisfy me. And it's endless. And it's exhausting. And that is what samsara is. And we're living with, we call it stress. We're living with an inner pressure all the time because of this. And in fact, those who are yoga people, this is what brought you to yoga. An inner pressure, some kind of pain, some kind of difficulty, or some kind of craving for something, some sense of unfulfillment or some physical pain that you wanted to get out of. That's what drives everything we do, including what brought us to yoga. There's nothing wrong in it. That's part of the human condition, okay? That is samsara. So because we don't know, as we're going to see, we don't know our own fullness. We don't know the nature of the self as it truly is. We feel constantly inadequate, even if it's at a low grade level. All right? And round we go, satisfying ourselves in a short-term way and then inevitably feeling dissatisfied again, sooner or later. And what we try to satisfy ourselves with generally is what is called artha. You'll see these words. This is how we seek happiness, thinking it's going to make us always happy and it's only short term. Artha means wealth, money, or security. So you're supposed to be secure. You're supposed to have some amount of wealth. The amount varies depending on our karma. All right. Some have a lot. Some of us are meant to have enormous houses or your own island or whatever, and others have very modest homes or an apartment or something. So that's up to the laws of karma. We're all supposed to have some sense of security and some degree of wealth. But what we tend to do is want whatever we have, we want more. It's never enough. So we start chasing after more money. Let me work a little harder and get more overtime. Let me build up that retirement fund. Let me buy another house. Let me put an extension on the house. Let me, etc. Okay? Another car, whatever it is. So I feel more secure. So I feel if I generate just a little bit more money, then I'll feel okay. All right? The other thing we run after is called kama, and that means pleasure. One more lollipop. One more scroll through Facebook. One more movie. One more orgasm. Whatever it is. One more slice of chocolate cake. One more hour staying up past 10 o'clock. Okay? We go after these things that we think, oh, that will make me feel good. And in fact, even the yoga world right now is partly driven by doing things that feel good. I just do what feels good. This has nothing to do with dharma, okay? This has to do with an excessive attraction to kama, thinking if I just always do what feels good, then I'll feel okay. But what feels good never lasts, okay? You're supposed to have pleasure. You're supposed to have some degree of pleasure as much as you're supposed to have some degree of wealth and security, all right? And then the next thing people run after is dharma. Dharma, nothing wrong in it. Doing the right thing. If I just eat at the right times, sleep at the right times, treat everybody well, give my excess money to good causes, do the right rituals, follow the right religion, that's all under the hood of dharma, then I'll feel okay. I'll be okay with me. Then I'll be happy. And so I did mention religion. Religious belief falls under the heading of dharma here. And this is how people can get caught up in religion in the same way that they get caught up in pleasure seeking or caught up in money grabbing. Okay? If the reason someone is in a religion is this is going to make me feel okay, if I believe in that, then I'll feel fulfilled. Then I'll feel satisfied. That's no different, really, in a sense, than running after pleasure or excessive wealth. None of those things will actually give you full-time changeless fulfillment. So the final one here is moksha. Moksha means liberation. Liberation from what? From a life of samsara, from a life of becoming or a life of suffering. Once one realizes, which is what's happening for Arjuna, no matter whether I'm successful or I fail, I win or lose, I gain or destroy, whatever it is, no matter what, even if I do the right thing, the most dharmic thing, I still will feel inadequate, dissatisfied, unfulfilled, sad. Now what I want is liberation from that. I want shreyas. I want a happiness that doesn't come and go. I want ultimate, unchanging, lasting goodness, permanent good. Not the lollipop. I want to feel okay whether I have the lollipop or I don't have the lollipop. I want to have the attitude of the adult who is witnessing the child and can enjoy the child licking the lollipop, can enjoy the child's enjoyment of the pleasure, but the adult also kind of enjoys the falling of the lollipop and the dismay that the child's having, witnesses that and sees the beauty in that, sees the beauty in the loss of the lollipop. Though it's sad to the child, the adult witnessing that loss doesn't feel sad. The adult simply is witnessing losses and gains, gains and losses, witnessing the samsara, but not caught up in it. The adult remains unaffected by whether the child has the lollipop or loses the lollipop. And that's shreyas, permanent, changeless happiness that doesn't rise and fall due to the circumstances. And that is what Arjuna is asking for. This is from Adi Shankaracharya, who wrote the original bhashya or commentary on the text. In his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, he says the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is the ultimate good, shreyas, which comes through ending the suffering of life, ending samsara, which is, he's defining samsara here, which is the rising and falling of pleasure and pain. That's the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, to be clear, the circumstances of life still take place. Enjoying a lollipop will happen. The dissolving of the lollipop into nothing or the falling of the lollipop to the ground will also happen. Those comings and goings happen, but the person with Shreyas doesn't rise and fall with those changes. Remains permanently good, permanently satisfied. Okay, so we reach the 11th verse, the 11th shloka of chapter 2. The teaching begins. In a traditional teaching context of the Gita, this is usually where the teacher begins teaching, because this is where Krishna begins teaching. Now, Krishna spoke before, but he wasn't giving the ultimate teaching of how to resolve the fundamental human condition problem. He was just coaxing Arjuna to get up and fight, because up to this point, Arjuna wasn't asking for a teaching. All right? This is the first time in the 11th shloka that Krishna opens up his mouth to give a teaching. And we can learn something here about the nature of the teacher-student relationship. We can also learn something here about the nature of any good relationship in which we might find ourselves in the position of being an advisor. And that is that Krishna listens. For all of chapter 1, he listens. All right? He doesn't open his mouth. From the moment Arjuna starts talking and freaking out and rationalizing, he doesn't say anything. He doesn't jump in right away with his advice and his recommendations and his opinions. He sits quietly and listens. We could all learn something from that. To listen more, keep our mouths quiet unless we're asked. And then when Arjuna asks, he's giving him permission. Then he speaks, and we can learn then about the nature of an apt student, one who is sattvic, who says, this is what I think, what do you think? One who asks, says, I take refuge in you, I trust you, I want to know what your perspective is about this. That trust of the student in the teacher, that is a capacity of an apt student whose mind is available. And then the capacity of the teacher, one who listens and waits to be asked. And so what happens here? Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, the great Lord speaks. And here's what he says. He says, you're speaking words of wisdom, all these rationalizations. You sound wise. Yet, you are grieving for those who are not to be grieved. The wise do not grieve for those who are gone, nor for those who are not yet gone. This is a big teaching. Here we start to get actually the ultimate teaching for how to resolve our condition of human suffering, all right? Now, when he says you grieve for those who are not to be grieved, he's not saying, Duryodhana is a bad guy, he's evil. You shouldn't grieve him. Let him go. He's not saying that. He's also not saying don't grieve. Sometimes this shloka gets mistranslated and Krishna is wrongly quoted as saying do not be sad. But if you look at that, he's not saying don't be sad. This is a terrible response for someone who's sad, right? We know this now. Our society is maturing a little bit enough to know, like, usually when someone cries, it's best not to try to help them stuff their feelings and say, don't be sad, right? We allow the feelings to take place. And this is what Krishna is doing. And this is what we can do as teachers and advisors and friends and parents and siblings. When someone's having an emotion, we don't try to stuff it and make it go away because it's uncomfortable for them or for us. We don't say don't be sad or don't grieve. And that's not what Krishna is saying. He's saying you're grieving But a wise person, and you sound wise, but a truly wise person would not grieve. What do I want to say about this? Okay. What he is saying is that a wise person would see the situation differently than how you're seeing it. Your viewpoint is off relative to how a wise person would view this. You don't have your wise head on. Really, though, you sound smart. All right. And for the rest of the chapter 2, he goes on to explain what is the way in which a wise person would view the situation. What reality does the wise person see that Arjuna is not seeing? And so what we'll get here is the vision of a wise person in a circumstance of life, in a crisis situation. Okay. So we're going to get into a little bit of, this gets a little bit heavier Vedanta in a moment here. Oh, I lost a few slides here again. Okay, so then what Krishna says to Arjuna is, there was never a time, after he says a wise person wouldn't grieve, then he as a wise person says, why wouldn't he grieve? Why should you not grieve? Why is there no need to grieve? Is because, not because those guys are bad and don't grieve them, but because there was never a time that I did not exist, neither you didn't exist, nor all these kings on the battlefield. There was never a time that we didn't exist. Nor will any of us cease to exist in the future. There is no death, is what he's saying. My slides did something weird today. Let's see what happens. Oh, yeah, they went back to being weird. Okay, hopefully that's okay. All right, so here we get into a little heavy Vedanta. So what we have to do here now is discern what is being grieved from what is the truth of the situation, all right? So we can think now here, what is Arjuna grieving? What do we grieve when, let's just talk about death specifically, all right? Or the loss of a person, or even the loss of a thing. Let's talk about a body. What are we grieving? Are we grieving the loss of the body of the person? The mind and personality of the person? What is the thing that we grieve the loss of? I'm going to come back to this heavier terms and just skip to this. Let's see. Yeah. So what are we attached to? If you think about your own body mind or the body minds of your loved ones, all right, what is it that we fear the loss of? Do we fear the loss of the physical body, what's called the sthula sharira in Sanskrit? Or do we fear the loss of the subtle body, which includes the mind? You know, they say, I think, therefore I am. So we might be able to say, yeah, you know, I know that we're not really the body, and if I get injured, I still exist, but I am my mind. And if that's lost, then I'm gone. So let's look at that. Who are we? What are we? That's the question here. Your physical body is what? Tissues, organs, cells, and so on. Now, if you think you are the physical body, and most people taking a Bhagavad Gita course don't think they are the physical body, though you may spend a lot of time making the physical body appear in a particular way and feel in a particular way. And when your body gets injured, your shoulder gets injured, you know, you say like, I'm hurt, right? I'm in pain. If my back hurts, I'll say, I'm in pain, not this body is in pain, and so on. So we identify with it. But what are we identifying with? Because all of this physical stuff is subject to constant change. Are you the physical body? That's the question. Well, if you're the physical body, what are you? Are you one of those parts? Are you the collection of those constituents? All of that put together is you? Well, the body that you have now is not the body that you had when you were a newborn baby. Were you that person then? You're the same person, but the body is different. In fact, every 12 years, they say, you have a completely new body. All of your cells have regenerated every 12 years. In the time span of this talk, some of your cells will have died, and new ones may be regenerating now. All right? So what of that is you? If it can all start collapsing, then we can see, I am not the body. Okay? But surely I'm my mind. What is the mind part of? My thoughts, my personality. This is what's called the Sukshma Sharira in Sanskrit, or the subtle body. And here's a list of all the constituent parts of the subtle body that you may be identifying with. Your life force, the prana that's pumping through the nadis, the channels of prana. Your mind and thoughts. Well, I am what I think. I think, therefore I am. Right? Well, your mind can be broken into constituent parts. Your mind is made of the buddhi, which is your intellect, the manas, which is your feelings, your emotions, your senses, your likes and dislikes, and the chitta, which is your memory. But none of that is stable. It's constantly undergoing change. The prana is constantly undergoing change. Even the channels of prana, they say, disappear and reappear depending on whether prana is flowing through a particular channel. That channel will disappear if there's no prana there, and reappear if prana is flowing. And your thoughts are constantly changing. Your opinions change if you're open-minded. All right? Your feelings change. One day you say, I'm angry. The next day you say, I'm happy. So the manas is constantly undergoing change. One day you crave one thing, the next day you crave another thing. That's part of the manas, your likes and dislikes. Your senses may change. You know, if you lose a sensory capacity, if you lose your vision or your hearing, are you still you? You're still you. So you're not your senses, because you're still you. You're still you. If some of your physical body deteriorates or regenerates, you're still you. If some aspects of your subtle body deteriorate or undergo a change, which they're doing constantly, you're still you. And even your personality totally collapses when you investigate it, because the personality or ego, it's called ahankara in Sanskrit. Ahankara technically means the I maker. It's just the sum total of all those other things I just listed. When you put together your memories, everything that's happened to you as far as you recall it, which is a total distortion from what really happened, right? All your memories, all your personal likes and dislikes, the way that you interact with your senses, the way you see color, the way you smell, the way that you feel, your emotions, and all of your thoughts, the sum total of all of that is your personality. And all of that collapses into constituent parts, and those constituent parts are constantly undergoing change. None of it is stable. And though it's all changing all the time, you still remain I. Right? Though you are a completely different person now than you were 10 years ago, you didn't, most cases, sometimes you do get a new name, but you think of yourself as the same person. You experience a stability. Something there remains the same, though there's constant change in the body, including the subtle body. So what are you? So what Krishna is calling upon us to do is called Drug Drishya Viveka, to discern between what you really are and what you perceive yourself to be, what you're under the impression that you are your thoughts and your body. And actually, we do a ton of things to uphold that, right? The hair turns gray. That doesn't fit with what I think I'm. Dye it black again. Okay. The mind starts to change. Nope, that's not what I thought. Let me pull back to my old rigid way of thinking. We try to hold stable that which isn't stable because we are mistaking those things, the body, mind, to be what I really am. But what I really am remains changeless. How do I discern that of myself, the truth of myself, which doesn't die, which is not to be grieved, from the body, mind, which comes and goes anyway? The way that we do this is what they say in Vedanta is that which is observable is not the self. The self, the I, is the one observing. The I is the subject, and everything else is the object. So if you can objectify it, if you can experience it with your senses or describe it, all right, if you can observe it, it's not you because you are the one observing it. Can you observe your body? Yes. Can you observe your mind, your thoughts? You can even, if you're a subtle type of person, you can observe prana. You can observe what's happening with the senses. You can observe your emotions. If you can witness it, it's not you. It is an object to be seen and known. This is said in Patanjali Yoga Sutras as well. The mind is an object to be seen and known. Therefore, you are not the mind any more so than you are the body. So everything we think we are, and we fight for it as if it's what we are, is the drishya, the observable. You are the drig, the one observing. The self, what is called the self, is what you really are. So it's like this. You have a close relationship with your body-mind, so you think you are the body-mind. What you really are is you are the one dwelling within the body-mind. Like when you sit in your car, you easily don't mistake yourself for the car. You know you're the one dwelling within the car, and that the car is an object to be seen and known. Your body-mind is just like the car. It's just that it's so close to you that it's harder to discern the difference between myself and my body-mind. But you can take it the same way, just like your car isn't you. You are the dweller within the car. The body-mind isn't you. You're the dweller within. Now, sometimes what happens is, as these teachings unfold, it's common to start to get the wrong message that the body-mind isn't real. Only you, the self, is real, and the body-mind is an illusion. That is not the teaching. In the same way, your car is not an illusion. It is real, and it is useful to you. It has a function and a purpose, and you are, as the inhabitor or the owner of the car, you are the steward of the car. You should take good care of the car because it's serving you a great purpose. All right? In the same way, it's not that the body and mind is not real. We're not saying it's an illusion and it's not real and only the indweller is real. We're just saying you are the indweller, you are not the body-mind. It is close to you. It serves a purpose and a function, and you are the steward, the caretaker, and the inhabitor of the body-mind. It's up to you to take care of it. But you are not the body-mind any more than you are your car. It's just you have a very special relationship with your own body-mind. And so it's easy to confuse it for me. So what is me? the me. The body mind is often called the deha. That's one of the words for the body is the deha in Sanskrit. It means that which is given. And the dehi is the one, the indweller within. So you are the dehi, he says. And what is the dehi? What is the indweller within the body mind? Is described as Satchidananda. Satchidananda, Sat means existence or beingness. Chit is consciousness. And Ananda means limitlessness. It's often translated as bliss, which is not incorrect, but it's a confusing translation of the word because we mistake an ice cream cone for bliss. So that's not the kind of bliss that Ananda is. All right, it's better to describe it as endless or limitlessness. That's a better, more useful translation of Ananda when describing what is the self. The self or the indweller within the body mind is Satchidananda. It is limitless, conscious being or beingness. That is what you are. You are limitless, free from any limitation. There's no end to the true nature of the self. You are conscious. You are the one who is aware. The self is the awareful one, the conscious one, the one observing all of the objects, including the body mind. So chit, conscious or aware. And you exist. Sat. A simple way to put it is conscious being. You are the conscious being. That is what you are. You are not the body. Is the body conscious? No. Is the mind conscious? Not really. It is an instrument, and consciousness alights that instrument. You are the conscious being, the indweller within, which is free from limitation, including the limitation of the mind and body. And therefore, when the mind and body goes, consciousness remains. It never dies. And therefore, the wise person knowing this doesn't grieve. We're going to wrap up with a little metaphor here. You can think of a computer or a smart device, such as it is, okay? A computer has hardware, like your physical body is hardware. And the computer has software, which is like your subtle body. And both serve a purpose, but they are dependent on electricity. They're dependent on a current. Without the current, the hardware and software exist, but they're useless. They don't function. And with the current, they serve a function. All right? The truth of your being is like that current, which doesn't come and go. If I unplug my computer, did electricity die? No, the computer died. I just got a new computer, actually, and I transferred all the software over. Did I cry about the old computer going? No. I might cry if all the content goes away. But both of those are dependent on the current of electricity. The body and mind are dependent on the consciousness within, the indweller within, which is limitless conscious being. I'm going to skip that for now and go to here. So Satya Mithya is another classical Sanskriti way to describe this. Here I have a paper cup. Actually, I have one here too. So what is this? If I ask you what this is, most people will say it's a cup. Looks like a cup, has functioned as a cup. My kids were doing watercolor painting with water in this. It functions as a cup, looks like a cup. What if I say it's paper? Yeah, that's also true. It's a paper cup, so it's also paper and it's a cup. Which is more true? What is it now? Is it paper or a cup? It's It's paper, right? So what's more true is the paperness, not the cupness. And that is satya mitya, okay? The truth of an object is that which is unchangeable, unchanging, independent. This paper remains paper whether it's turned into a cup or not. The cup is mitya. The cup is dependent on paper for its existence. And that's the body mind. The body mind is mitya. It exists. It's not an illusion. Mithya doesn't mean illusion. Mithya means dependent reality. It's real, but it's dependent on a deeper truthness, a more true reality, which is satya. So you have a body mind which is mithya, but the truth of your being is not the body mind. The truth of your being is that upon which the body mind depend. And that is Satchidananda Atma, the conscious being that dwells within. And when the body mind goes, the consciousness remains unaffected. In the 16th shloka, Krishna says, that which is real, which is satya, is never not being. The paper remains, regardless of whether it's turned into a cup or not. That which is real is never not being. The ultimate truth of both, what is satya and what is mithya, is understood by a wise person. He says, know that by which this entire world is pervaded, it should say pervaded, is indestructible. The consciousness which pervades everything, which is the source and substance of everything, cannot be destroyed. It is unchangeable. What is destroyed is subject to change. All right? What is not subject to change and therefore not subject to destruction and therefore cannot be grieved is the truth of everything, which is pervading everything. Satchidananda Atma. Okay, I'm going to wrap up and we'll finish next week so I can have time to take a few questions for those who want to stay on. So he says, the self is never born, nor does it die. That's the indweller. It is eternal and undergoes no change. Though the body may be destroyed and will be eventually destroyed, the self is never destroyed. That is why do not grieve. And he says, just as a person gives up old clothes and takes on new ones, you don't think when you change your clothes that you're the one going in the laundry. It's just an outfit. So does the self do this. The indweller gives up an old body and takes on a new one. Weapons cannot destroy the dweller within. Fire cannot burn it. Water cannot wet it. Wind cannot dry it. It is not subject to destruction or change in any way. It is changeless, all-pervading, stable, immovable, eternal. That is what you are. That is what all these kings are. And knowing this, you have no cause to grieve. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. All right. If you have questions,